Back downstairs, decided to work on the block again. Figured it's time to put in the crank and bearings on, well, preferably the bearings in the crank. And all the pistons and all that good stuff that goes with that. If you look down there, the boards don't look bad from this side. Just bear in mind with me on this. I'm not teaching you how to do a proper rebuild. That takes going to the machine shop, having it bored out and all that kind of stuff. This is just for the guy that's short on cash, needs to put his engine back together. He picks up a cheap engine, finds out it's not quite what he thought it was, and decides he wants to rebuild it. And that's exactly what I got here. I was expecting something minor, turned into something a bit more major. A broken piston, which we will there's a broken piston. That's why I have one cylinder that wasn't quite dead, but it was close to it. And that ring is stuck in there. It's not coming out. So, what started as minor turned into major, but it still did not turn into replace all the pistons, just turned into replacing one piston. Because if I'd have done this otherwise, I would have gone flat top pistons. First thing we're going to do, we'll put the cam in it. Now, I'm building this engine out of parts and pieces that I've collected from prior builds and stuff, but some things just don't change. Like, hey, you need to put lube on the cam. Now, since this is a roller cam, I really don't have to worry about getting all the lobes and stuff. And I've already messed up here. Not with the build as such, but strictly the order in which I need to do things. So, lubricate the bearings. Put some assembly lube right there. We'll slip this in, reach inside, and very gently slide it in to the next one, where I will get more lube. Pull this back out a little bit and lube that up. Okay, I got the gear on. As you can see, I had to go out and get it. This is not the gear that I'm running. I'm running a double roller cam. Double roller chain. Blah. After you get the cam in, make sure you can turn it. Now, don't expect it to just spin, especially if you put assembly grease on it like I did. Right at first it's going to be kind of stiff, but then it'll loosen up. And I'm going to do this while I go ahead and put a little bit more grease on all the lobes, just to make sure that the initial break-in goes properly. The easiest way to do this is just start at the back and work your way forward. Okay, main bearings. It's got a big old hole right there. You got a big old hole right here. You can see me sticking my knife in there. That's a block, that's a hole. Line everything up. Line up the tab with a hole there. See how the hole's in line there? You can see there's a black hole there. You're not seeing any metal. And just a little bit of oil. First we're going to clean this. It's just so there's lubrication between the bearing and the crank. And not very much lubrication because you don't want a lot. You don't want to put your grease in here. And everybody's different as to what they want to use. Everybody got a preference. I've seen everything from graphite to using STP engine treatment. And you know what? They all work. I can't say a single one of them you can go off and say, oh, that won't work. They will all work. Oops. Get that set in place. Whew. Open up the tops. You see the tops? They don't have the oil hole. When you're doing these, the main thing is to check and make sure you're level across the top. You can feel it with your finger. Even with gloves on, you can feel it. If it's not, same way if you run your finger across here, you can feel if there's a burr or anything like that. Make sure your arrow's pointing the right direction. And then set it in place. Now, plastic gauge, so you know everything's correct. But once you got this all tight, you should be able to turn the crank. If you grab it, it don't want to turn, there's something wrong. I hope you can see this. That is just dead on 2000s, which is right where it should be. Now, you know, check them, make sure, and then check your rods. It's the same way. Put it together. It's time consuming, but it's also the safest way to be. And everything is torqued down. I want you to see. That crank spins just as free and easy as can be, and it's just got a light film of oil. Okay, I just did a whole thing there and you missed it all. Alright, put lube on your bearings instead of just oil. Especially if you don't know how long the engine is going to sit before you crank it up. And the other thing is put lube on your rear main seal and offset the seal just a little bit when you install it. That way you don't have your cap, your bearing, and your seal all on one level plane. The seal is offset so oil will not leach through. You can see the cam's all lubed up, ready to go. Being a roller cam, it really does not require the grease. I only put that on there because, well, I'm going to put this together and I'm not real sure how long before I get it put together and the time I get it installed that it's going to set. I got floor pans, I've got steps to put in it. I just got a bunch of other work to do on this thing. But that brings you up to speed until I come back to put the bolts in. I'm going to drop the crank in, put the ARP lube on the bolts so I can get good torque specs on it. And then we'll come back and do the pistons. Check the rings. Make sure the end gap on the rings is correct because you sure don't want them to be too tight. Too tight, they'll bind up, break a ring. Too loose, you got blow by. Aren't you glad I told you all that? And on that note, I will say this is the end of this video, even though I've started it and stopped it, I think about 7 to 10 times. So have a good night, day, whatever it is, whenever you're watching this. Like, share, like. I'll get the right finger up there. It's a thumb, not a finger. Like, share, subscribe, tell a friend, tell 12. And maybe I'll have something that you'll be interested in. Okay, checking your end gap on your rings. Take your rings, see the little dot there on the top? That's the top of your ring. Read the paperwork that comes with your rings. Slide the ring in like this. And slide it down. Pull the top up. Now before I go any further, you want to have some way to set the depth on all these when you're checking them. What I use is my ring compressor and one of my pistons. Ring compressor's on there tight, you can see it's around the groove. And we'll put it in square and you just slide it down. Stop. Because I'm sure not going to buy one of those high-dollar tools. Now, the gap on this is supposed to be between 10 to 20 thousandths, which, let's see if I can move you around here so you can see a little better. I don't know if we can or not. Probably won't be able to see once I get this down in there. This is 19 to 21. This is a go, no-go. 19 just, I mean it just goes in. 21 will not go. So it's a tight 19, which is just exactly where I want to be. Now, all I got to do is do this to all the rest of the cylinders, each one. As I do each one, I take it over, I lay it out by the pistons to the piston that it's going to. In this particular case, this is number 8. And that's basically all there is to checking the end gap on your pistons. on your rings, not your pistons. Jeez, I'm goofing up here today. But for me, this is the easiest way I know to do it. You just set this up, put your ring compressor on there, tighten it down, and that way you're getting the same depth every time. When you take them back out, slide them out from the bottom where the gap's at. See? That way they don't scuff the cylinder wall. Got a tiny little more, whoop, and it's gone. That's how much of a scuff it left. And that's all there is to that. Okay, we've loaded up the rings, got the pistons ready. Put your little end caps on so you don't scar the crank. Put your bearing in. No lube, at least I don't. And you can see right there, a little arrow points forward. That tells you what direction to go. Which way the piston's supposed to be pointing. I'm going to do this from the side. Now we just reach down. And it's in place. Now the next thing to do is take your bearing cap, put your bearing in it, roll the engine over, take those off, and dadgummit, I forgot to cut the plastic gauge. Alright, we're gonna plastic gauge it just like we did the crank. Should be 2/1000 on this, and then it will all be done. We'll do the same with all the rest of them. Each one, we just turn it a little bit. I do it, plastic gauge it. If it checks out right, I slide the rod back down, put the caps on, of course, because you do not want to scar the crank. Slide the rod back down, put my grease on, put the cap back on, torque it, and just tighten it down. I don't torque them, not yet. I do that last. But I do run the caps down. Okay, I'm going to leave it at that. And the bottom end is all together. Took a little while. I checked and double checked and triple checked everything. But it's worth it in the end. Because then you've got a good base for your rebuild. Okay, I'm done for now. Like, share, subscribe. Maybe I'll have something you'll be interested in the next time. Bye.